Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Today I will share with you my recent interview with Hogne Ulla, who joined me for a conversation about startups and scale-ups and health tech sector, so medical technology as well as healthcare IT developments. He shared with me his opinion around the subject. He shared with me how he got into the industry, what he likes about it, and his comparison of work for a startup company versus a large company. If you want to learn more, if you want to hear his opinion and his experience, please keep watching this video. Please leave comments and questions below. Thanks for joining, and I hope you will enjoy the video. I welcome you to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me. I will tell the audience a little bit about you, and then I'll ask you a few questions because I think you have a great career in healthcare industry and I'd like to learn more, and I'm sure there are many people out there who would like to learn what options they have, especially when they're trying to enter healthcare and med technology industries. I'll give a quick intro.
Yeah.
Okay, so Hogne Ulla resides and works in Belgium. Hogne has a great experience in startup and early business development in medical and healthcare technology sectors. His educational background is business administration and economics, and he worked in various industries before he shifted his focus towards healthcare. He's been in this industry for about 4 years now and has a very dynamic career with core responsibilities lying in business development and international sales and marketing in medical and healthcare sector. He worked as business development director in a company that is involved in technology that uses AI for medical imaging processing. And he also worked in technology company that was developing tools to make lives of epilepsy patients easier. I guess I'll ask you a question. What is your current role? Can you tell me a little bit more? What do you do now?
Sure. First of all, Anna, thanks so much for allowing me to join your show and for the invitation. It's very true. I've been working for the last 4.5 years in the medtech industry, and I currently hold a role since just 2 weeks ago as a senior business developer for a company called EarlyTracks. And the mission that we have is actually to turn medical records into actionable knowledge using artificial intelligence methods such as natural language processing and machine learning technologies. And what's actually happening and what has been happening for a time already is that medical records are moving from paper to digital. So there is a great potential in analyzing large sets of data and extracting meaningful information for both clinical and financial purposes. And that, just to quickly stress the difference between those, from a financial point of view in healthcare, it might be interesting for hospitals to recognize different kinds of medical procedures and to match these with reimbursement codes. While in a clinical setting, obviously, the potential could be to see what kind of medication the patient has been given at different hospitals and make sure that you avoid, for example, certain allergies or interfere with other medication that the patient is taking. So again, it's a very interesting, cool new challenge in healthcare.
Well, congratulations on a new position. It sounds very interesting. And I think that's exactly what the trend is, right? You want to connect multiple sets of data and make life, I guess, of doctors and patients easier. I think that's the ultimate. Okay, so let's start from the very beginning. So can you tell me, why did you shift your focus from other industries towards healthcare? How did you start? And was it easy to start? Because I know you're in Europe, and I'm just curious, what is that barrier to enter the industry in Europe?
Yeah, actually my how to say journey started when I was still living and working in Norway. I was holding a job in the public sector, in the education sector, and to be honest, it was really not my cup of tea. a lot of, it wasn't necessarily the biggest organization, but there was already a lot of politics. It was, many days the same. And I was looking for, let's say, a more dynamic environment. I've always been interested in helping people. And since my girlfriend was based in Belgium, I was looking for jobs and companies in Belgium. And a little bit by coincidence, one of the strengths of the University of Leuven here in Belgium is indeed the healthcare and technology intersection. And there are a number of spin-offs and companies which I then decided to contact. And one of those were icometrix, which is an imaging AI company, very successful in the field of neurology, radiology. Recently raised $18 million to scale and grow the company even further. And again, what triggered me was to be able to help people through technology, to be able to use my, let's say, business background to help more an engineering kind of team and company wanting to transform from, let's say, a research-driven organization to a more, let's say, scale-up and clinical environment where they could really make sure that the technology was reaching its potential in the real world. Yeah.
Well, that's great. And do you have many companies right now in similar area in AI technology in Europe?
Yeah. Yeah, and even just in Belgium alone, there is a very strong ICT sector in Belgium alone is very strong. There are a number of IT companies, and then matching those with a number of interesting healthcare actors. As you know as well, there are some pharmaceutical companies based in Belgium. Yes. Janssen's Pharmaceutica is one of those. But what's actually is triggering my interest are more the smaller companies which are able to move very fast with technology. So here in Belgium, for example, some very cool companies are on Comfort and FibreCheck. On Comfort are actually using virtual reality and putting these goggles on people that are about to have operation to actually ease their pain, and using actually hypnosis to take away the anxiety of going through a procedure. Very new way of applying virtual reality there. And FibreCheck is actually using just the camera of your smartphone. You hold your finger in front of the camera to actually measure and detect possible heart arrhythmia and changes in your heart rate and the health of your heart. And the companies that I worked for so far, icometrix, indeed. Using AI to actually help radiologists screen and analyze MRI scans and CT scans much faster, more accurate. Epihunter, who uses wearable EEG, taking EEG out of the hospital and into the daily life of people to detect epileptic seizures in real time and helping them in the everyday life, which obviously happens outside the hospital and not only when you're going to your doctor. And there are tons of other very, very cool companies doing this. And to be honest, COVID has been an opportunity for these companies to, for example, facilitate the teleconsultations happening. And again, digital tools then becomes even more, meaningful. And yeah, it has actually proven to become an opportunity for these companies.
Yeah, no, for sure. Sounds really great. And can you tell me a little bit more about international experience that you had? One of your positions, you were in charge of sales and marketing on international markets, and you were supposed to partner with countries, I guess, and different hospitals, different institutions in different countries. What kind of challenges did you have, especially being part of the startup, a company with no big name? Was it a challenge to approach different places, different countries? Did you find it was hard or maybe easy?
Yeah, it's definitely not easy. What makes it easier, and that applies both at home and abroad, is when you are a small company, you can adapt faster, you can tailor solutions to address the specific needs of clients. But in terms of healthcare, my first experience was indeed with icometrix, where we were looking for establishing the first clinical contracts. And actually we were then a Belgian company still, and we very much believed in growing in Europe first, maybe going to the US after that. But actually our first contracts came in Iran, India, and Japan. And it actually showed that there are a number of high-end hospitals around the world, no matter where, which are looking for new technology to improve the care of their patients. And they don't necessarily always care if it's a small or a big company. They are looking into the precision and the quality of these, for example, softwares or medical devices to make sure that they are of a high quality. And actually, if you can prove that you are in the field of radiology, for example, you are accurate, you have a proven record from research, you have worked with a number of large universities, also these countries abroad, which might not be familiar with the specifics of the Belgian market, they will probably recognize the name of big universities, hospitals, and in that way also be open for new ideas. But it's certainly not easy. The time difference can be a challenge, and the mentality of icometrix was that obviously we strongly believed back then that we would have our own salespeople, for example, based in Europe. But if we would go to a far market like Japan, working with a local partner distributor would be more beneficial. Yeah. Especially as in Japan, they really the level of trust, working with people from the same culture is very important. So we actually partnered back then with the company called Micron, a CRO company, so actually more towards clinical trials, but they wanted to include the radiology software of icometrix to help doctors in Japan. And again, the difference between working with the distributor in Japan, for example, to one in, I don't know, Sweden, is that in Japan, the culture is thinking in, how to say, in long terms. And obviously they have this how to say, culture back in the days to build long-term relationships. So you obviously don't want to put in just, let's say, a 1-year term of the contract. You want to put maybe 3 years. Yeah. To also show that you are chipping in and wanting this relationship to grow, and that you really have a long vision. But obviously, as a young company and as a commercial company, you also want to be sure that your distributor is reaching their goals. But so that's really a give and take. In other countries, you might be willing to, let's say, be a little bit more harsh and then put a shorter timeline with some concrete goals to create revenues. But with Japan as well, the goal was to acquire the medical device registrations and everything. So there was definitely a reason for thinking ahead. And I think that kind of summarizes some of the challenges. So definitely, it's also a strength if your team, if your company has people from different parts of the world. I remember doing sales calls to various countries, but I had a Spanish-speaking colleague with me, so making calls to, for example, Argentina was not a problem at all, and it helps you to get in touch and lower the cultural barriers that might be there in the first place.
Yeah, no, it is fascinating. I think it's very interesting to work internationally, and I'm sure many of my viewers also interested, and those are the questions I receive. They're questioning, can we go and work internationally? How can we somewhere? Is it hard? Is it easy? So thank you. Thanks a lot. And what is it that you love about working in startup and scale-up environment? Actually, before you answer that, can you briefly tell the main difference between startup and scale-up? Because maybe some of the people in the audience, they don't know. Would you mind?
Yeah. So my definition is a startup is a company who definitely has a bright idea. They have some first interest for the product. They might already be in a commercial process. A scale-up has already found that a product market fit. So they have not only proven that they have an interesting product, They have gotten those first revenues, and they might even have raised the sufficient capital to really scale and grow their company. Obviously, some companies are really in the intersection, which makes it both interesting but also challenging, meaning that you really have to get the first revenues to be able to scale. And also, the moment you as a company bring in new investors and you raise money, the expectations, of course, increases as well. So there might be both, advantages and benefits going for a startup versus a scale-up, but definitely a scale-up is the one who has maybe at that point of time the biggest potential for further growth. Yeah.
So what do you like about working in the environment of startups and scale-ups? What is it for you? Because it seems like you having experience of working a series of them, right? So
yeah, actually I want to tell a story, or actually it's more a fable to illustrate some of the differences working for a big company and a small one. I'm not sure if you heard it, but it's about 10 hungry monkeys. So it is a sociological experiment where 10 monkeys were placed in a large cage, and high up at the cage, beyond the reach of the monkeys, there were a bunch of bananas. And underneath the bananas was a ladder leading up to them. So in theory, they could quite easily reach them climbing the ladder. And the monkeys, they hadn't been fed for I think a day or so. They were extremely hungry, and the monkeys immediately spot the bananas, and the strongest begins to climb the ladder. And as he does, he receives a slight electric shocks, which keep him from ascending the ladder. And at the same time, the other monkeys climbing, they get the shock, and they are also sprayed with water. And obviously the monkey on the ladder falls off, and the 10 hungry monkeys are sitting there wet at the floor. But again, the temptation for the bananas is too great, so another monkey starts climbing up the ladder, and the same thing happens. He receives the electrical shock. The rest of the monkeys are being sprayed with this cold water. So what happens now is that one of the monkeys are removed. So you can think about having a new employee coming into a company. He is seeing these bananas as well. He heads to the ladder, but what happens is that the other monkeys, they know his intentions. They cut him off and they beat him. And this continues. So a second monkey is removed, coming in a new one. This time the new monkey is again heading towards the ladder. But this one, the monkeys are cutting him off, including the one who came up in the first place. And at the end of the experiment, all of these monkeys have been replaced. And despite none of them ever have experienced the electrical shock or getting the cold water, they have this built-in, learning that this is just the way we are doing things. And the analogy I want to make is that when you're working at a big company, there are often these established way of doing business. And the freedom that you have or the openness for new ideas might be restricted, while for a startup, anyone who comes in with a new, fresh set of eyes will be welcome. And it's really the key thing is to raise your voice and try to make a difference. So again, that's one of the most rewarding things for me, to be able to immediately have an impact. Obviously, when you join a new company, you have to go through training, but they are very curious about you as a candidate and want you to be able to have your influence very early on. And that's sometimes very difficult at larger companies.
Yeah.
And then in healthcare, the difference there again, being small and big, is again the speed, the agile mentality of indeed the very quickly iterate and bring new medical solutions to clients much faster. And again, being in the medical field, there are a lot of rules and regulations, which makes it sometimes complicated. So I think in bigger companies, they are very much focused on a specific way of doing things. They might have a lot of year plans on how to approach the market, while in smaller companies, you fail and you try. In the field of marketing, for example, we focus on the field of growth hacking marketing, where you try an experiment, you measure to see if there is some success. While at a bigger company, you maybe spend half a year on a big campaign, you spend lots of money pouring into this project, but at the end of the day, it might have very little value for your actual business. So a lot of small differences there between small and big companies in healthcare as well. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for the story about monkeys. That's very interesting and very descriptive. But what is, in your opinion, is so unique about healthcare sector? When let's say we're talking about just startups and scale-ups, and you had experience in working in different industries prior to healthcare. So what do you think is unique about healthcare startups?
Definitely, there is this interest in helping people. The fact that many startups indeed are spin-offs of universities means that even if you are a small team, even if you don't have the experience, maybe you might have a mentor, you might have a professor, etc., from the university, or let's say a medical doctor with long experience, which you can still rely on, and this person becomes your mentor indeed. And when you are traveling to conferences and you're meeting with important clients, this guy, this or woman for that sake, can be the opening the doors and allowing you to meet a lot of interesting people and help you to grow the company. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is just the dynamics of how technology is moving very fast, how digital is being introduced. And with all the respect for the work that the pharma industry does, they have indeed been doing things for a long time in the same way, not moving ahead so fast. Obviously, developing drugs is not only very expensive, it's taking a lot of time. While using, new technology, digital technology becomes very interesting. And one of the very cool things happening is digital therapy, where the idea is that you, by the help of technology, instead of necessarily a doctor, know whether or not to take a medication. The idea is that we don't follow the standard, procedure of going to the doctor with headache, and the first thing he will do is to prescribe you painkillers. The idea is to maybe use a smartphone app where you describe your complaints. There is an algorithm recognizing these, and actually it might suggest you to sit down for a bit, to breathe in and out, meditate, whatever, but trying to do something else than just put a medication in your mouth. And that idea is very interesting because we all know the side effects of medication, the expense of medication. So and that's something that I think pharma is chipping in on more and more. It's of course a very dangerous thought for them, because they are generating revenues from selling and prescribing medication, or having doctors prescribing medication. So definitely for them, this might be a big, fundamental change and challenge to their business models. But honestly, I think it's the only way forward. When we see the amount of digital health apps which are around, the amount of data which can be used to extract more meaningful knowledge, and maybe help doctors to understand that the headache is maybe not only from migraine, it might be something else which triggers it back in there. So it's definitely a very interesting industry to be part of. And again, I still must say I have never worked for a big pharma company or a big medical device company with hundreds or thousands of employees. But I have never regretted going for the startups, scale-ups, and indeed this is my third one now, and I strongly believe that will probably be my further career path as well. It's really so meaningful and cool to be part of smaller teams, and you share the success as well as you go. So it's really very nice to be part of. There is one more thing I want to bring up and to further illustrate the difference. And it also relates back to the fact that you as a young company, as a small team, might not have the same set of experience, trust from a big hospital or a potential client. And there as well, you as a sales person become kind of the face of the company. You have to represent them in a good way. But my mentality is to bring in more members of the team. So for example, if you're having a technical conversation with the hospital's ITers, you might bring in your company's IT person into the meeting. If you have a more scientific discussions with the medical doctors, you bring in someone from the research and development team having a very, let's say, scientific background. When we go over to more business, you might throw in the CEO in the meeting. So it's really about using the strengths of the company to highlight that there is a lot of knowledge in the company, even though it might be a smaller team. So yeah, that's one important element as well I want to bring up.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And I think it's very encouraging, because I think many people are thinking about careers in large companies because they're scared of startup experiences. But I also think there's not much to be scared about. It's just more of a choice that you're making, right? So you making it more creative, be part of smaller team versus bigger team. There's nothing wrong with neither. It's just startups. It's something that people sometimes feel a bit uncomfortable with, but it also can be much more creative and much more involved.
Absolutely. And there is also I mean, job security. I think a lot of people are thinking, I want to work for a big company, it offers me more security, more prospect. But I mean, from one day to the next, there can also be a major downsizing of a large company where they will maybe lay off, let's say, 500 employees, I mean, in one country alone. So while a startup company are typically very interested in developing the employees to stay on board and to become, how to say, more mid-management, senior level management employees later on. So I struggle to see why necessarily a big company should be more of a prospect than a smaller one. But it's true that obviously as a person who wants to establish a family, etc., you might want to look more than 1 to 2 years ahead. And of course that's there comes some risk with working for a young company, but at the same time the experience that you get from working there, even if the company would fail in what they're doing, you have learned something very, very meaningful, which you can definitely take with you further in the career. So, and I also strongly believe big companies are interested in hiring people from startup industry to further innovate and learn from these.
Okay, thanks. One of your roles included development of sales marketing strategy, where you work with digital marketing tools. And right now we live in the world of technology and digital marketing. And I would like to ask you to tell me a little bit more how digital marketing is working in healthcare industry. Is it on a rise? Is there a big place for it? Because I think many of the students that I talk to, they kind of going in those I would say social media technology areas as well, but they don't know if they're applicable, if they can do something with it. So can you please tell me a little bit more?
Yeah, I think we need to make a distinction between a B2C healthcare company and a B2B healthcare company. Obviously a B2C company, like for example, Epihunter, where we were targeting and helping people with epilepsy, and not necessarily their doctors alone. Facebook marketing, etc., was essential for what we were doing. Instagram to display the everyday life, the challenges that we were addressing. That's something that I think everyone can kind of already imagine themselves. A company targeting people, consumers, and you are using the social medias available for that. But when it comes to the B2B world, it's slightly more complex and difficult. I think a number of companies, indeed, big and small, are kind of a bit struggling with finding a good strategy in terms of using social media. I think LinkedIn and Twitter are the most commonly used. Obviously, those are different types of communication channels. We typically use Twitter more for example, conferences. Where people for a certain conference would follow a certain hashtag, or they would be looking around to try to connect. It's a good way of keeping a bit of noise and announcing small things during the conference. While LinkedIn is more complex, LinkedIn is also becoming important. It's not only how to say a career and let's say a tool that you use for professional matchmaking. It also becomes more and more a commercial channel. There are more and more advertisement out there. I believe many doctors are available on LinkedIn, but very many others are not. So it's also quite challenging. You will, however, be able to reach a very specific type of doctors, which might be the early movers who are indeed thinking a little bit ahead, which are digital, which are open to new ideas. Also, the hospital management are typically there, knowing now that hospitals are investing heavily in IT and digital technologies. These kind of people are also available on LinkedIn. But again, how are you then using LinkedIn for them? And there are various things. Obviously, you can use the direct messaging, the paid or unpaid version of that. That's probably meaningful for some, but being able to, for example, share knowledge and to share blog posts or that sort of content, inviting people to webinars I think is a more interesting opportunity. So LinkedIn gives you the opportunity to use various functions to showcase your company. So I think that's interesting. And then, as I kind of mentioned a bit earlier, you have the concept of growth hacking marketing, where you actually are trying to work with hacks to go around the traditional way of using these tools. In the sense of LinkedIn, for example, you could use some kind of bot, which would, for example, automatically send requests to connect with people, who would automatically be sending targeted messaging. That's interesting. If you, for example, want to go to a conference, you want to be targeting radiologists in, let's say, Turkey, and you can then use algorithms to automatically send messages to these people, for example, using their title and the name of the hospital. So definitely there is a lot of opportunities in using social media and digital tools, but it's not straightforward. You need to have people spending time on it. You need to, if you start, for example, using Twitter, there is an expectation from people following you that you would be sharing content regularly. So definitely, if I now say that we used it for conferences, doesn't mean that we were waiting 4 months until we posted something for the next conference. Indeed, you need to keep sharing. And that's why it doesn't make sense being on 5 to 6 different kinds of platforms. You need to select a few which you can use constantly, and where you will have content, where you know that you will meet the right audience. But definitely it's not straightforward, and it takes a bit of trial and error. So again, there is nothing wrong with trying something new. If you see that, for example, sharing YouTube videos to explain how your company is working is not working, then you can try something else. But again, the mentality should be there, open for the idea that you can experiment a bit with it to see how you can reach the audience.
Yeah, great, thanks. And you touched on talking to doctors and end users, and I would like to talk a little bit more about the adoption process. Do you find it's easy to have that first communication with doctors, or you find it's challenging? Because from my experience, sometimes some doctors can be relatively conservative, but some doctors can be much more open to new technologies and much more open to the idea of AI and innovative imaging processing. So what is your experience with working with end users?
Yeah, it's indeed very challenging, and you do have these two groups, and indeed the early movers. Let's not focus on them for now. I think we can both imagine that those are open for new ideas, so it might be easier to approach. But a typical skeptical doctor has typically been doing his job in the same way for 25 so years. Imagine we are meeting with a radiologist at a big hospital. in order to move up the grades and becoming the head of radiology. He has obviously been doing things well as well for a long time. Things are working more or less good for him. So why would he change the way he's working or the tools that he's using? In the sense of icometrix, obviously the precision and the quality of the service was very important. It was important that it was not only used in research, but that it was clinical research, that there were actual patients analyzed, actual scans. And the challenge in radiology is that the quality of scans will vary as well. You might have a hospital group with several locations where the university hospital side of it would have very good modern scanners, while the, let's say, countryside location might have a scanner, MRI scanner, but of a lower quality. So there will be also a difference in the input quality that you are sending for analysis. And here again, the idea was to help them to implement new protocols for medical imaging. Mm-hmm. And that's something that they anyway would probably be interesting to do, because they do want to enhance the way they are using the scanners. And if they are buying a new scanner, for example, they're already investing a lot of money in it. They want to extract as much as possible from that. So in that sense, you also start helping them thinking about how their workflows can be improved. In the sense of radiology, it's a quite time-consuming task to screen and eyeball MRI images. We are talking about, in the sense of multiple sclerosis, for example, very small changes. So as a radiologist, you want to know how have the brain atrophy and lesions, for example, change from a 6 to 12 month range to the next, and the changes might be 0.3%. And seeing that with the naked eye is, of course, almost impossible. So having then a tool to assist you, it's important to think and emphasize that this is not necessarily replacing the radiologists as such, but it is helping them to spend more time on the complex cases where there is more a granularity of aspects to keep in mind. And in that sense, also even the most traditionally thinking doctor might be interested, because he knows that this tool is not only precise, but it's enhancing the way we are doing things. But again, I'm not saying that it's easy. It will take some time to implement. It will take some resources, but then mainly IT to make it happen. So my best advice is to have, let's say, one person at the hospital or the medical center that you are targeting, which is kind of your liaison, and which can be the spokesperson internally for you. It needs to be a person which you can quite easily reach on the phone or via email, who you can keep the communication. Like, what is stopping them? Sometimes it's internal things. Why isn't the contract signed when they have agreed to it? It might be, very, how to say, simple things internally, but from the outside you don't see it. So that's a very good tip. And then again, I think being able to demonstrate that your tool is precise is extremely important, and for a startup then even more challenging, because you don't have necessarily the track record. You might not have already all the academical papers and things that you might have in a couple of years. So then again, you want to work with these early movers, which we talked about in the beginning, and the early movers might be doctors who are willing to integrate and use the tool, even though it hasn't been necessarily validated to a very large extent yet. And then again, working with these gives you that credibility and clinical validation which you are looking for, which then again opens up the doors for the more traditionally thinking doctors.
I can imagine it can be very interesting and complex process, and it sounds like you've been doing quite well with that. I'm trying to show the real life to people who want to go and start working in this industry, so they understand how it works, what are the challenges, what are the benefits of it, and what kind of rewards they can really get and fulfillment from this type of work people can give in this industry. And I know we're running out of time a bit. I know I can probably ask you 10 easily, because I love this industry and I would love to learn more. But I guess we'll start to wrap up this interview for the sake of just time. And I want to say thank you for what you just shared with me. And I usually try to end my interviews with 2 questions. So the first one that I would like to ask you, do you have a modern time hero, in your opinion, or someone that you admire or someone you find quite fascinating to watch and to follow? Do you have that person in real life?
Yeah, I actually want to mention the entrepreneurs and the people who are willing to take risk to start companies, to create jobs, and maybe more specifically to those who do this in healthcare. One of my, how to say, modern heroes is my previous boss at the epihunter. He was the founder of the company and the CEO, but he was also a dad of a son with epilepsy. So they have this strong, how to say, story to bring as well. But for the same reason, he also gave up his very stable job for a big company. So he definitely had a lot of prospect already, and he left that to help his son. And I don't think we should underestimate the how tough that decision is. So definitely my respect goes certainly to these, to the everyday entrepreneurs in healthcare, which indeed want to bring on change, with or without a personal story. There is always this vision and mission of helping people, and starting new companies is not easy, and that creates also a lot of respect from my end to those people. And I'm very thankful for the opportunities that I've gotten from these 3 companies. They were all relatively small companies when I joined, and it has been really fascinating to work with the eccentric CEOs, very different from the leaders that I had in previous companies, and I truly respect both my managers and previous colleagues. So yeah.
Great. I'm thinking that maybe I'll share names of those companies underneath my video, so people who are watching, they can actually go and follow those companies and read a little bit more. Because I think that's the part, sometimes we do not even know what companies do because they're relatively small, they're not on the large radar, and people just do not know. But I know technologies can be quite fascinating, as you said.
Yep.
Yes. And my last question is, what is your favorite quote?
Oh, favorite quote. I believe it's from Winston Churchill. That attitude is a small thing who can make a big difference. My mentality is to be positive, to be open-minded, to bring in humor also in a conversation, sales conversation, and having how to say, a positive thinking attitude and a can-do mentality in healthcare is very important, because you will be facing a lot of challenges. Things will drag out in time. You will have to go through difficult processes with information security. It might be internal or IT related delays. So definitely having a positive attitude there is for me at least, proven to be very useful. And obviously it depends a bit on the personality you have, but for me that's really a must. And yeah, indeed, hopefully that's something that also the colleagues and the clients are recognizing as well, and it will make things easier for you.
That speaks a lot actually about the mindset and about the outlook on life, and I really appreciate your time. Thanks for sharing your experiences. I strongly believe that many people will appreciate this as well.
Well, again, thank you so much for inviting me. If anyone would have questions about disruptive technologies in healthcare, how to join the industry with or without experience, regardless of the education that you have, you can obviously find me. I'm sure, Anna, you will share some link to LinkedIn or so people can find me, but definitely reach out. Even if you're based in Europe or other regions, I'm happy to connect.
Well, thank you so much. We'll share that information, and yeah, I'm eternally grateful for your time. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll chat soon and we'll stay connected.
We will do. All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye-bye.